So let's continue our discussion of good writing technique in your introductory paragraph. So we were just looking over this example of a student's essay. So this is the starting of their essay on Stephen King's novella Rita Hayworth and Shawshank Redemption. So let's talk about a couple of things that are good about this paragraph. Okay, so let's look at the first sentence here. So when faced with adversity, a true hero will stand up and fight for what they believe in. Okay, so as a hook or introductory sentence, it's nice and broad, so it's giving us a little glimpse of what the student is going to talk about in their essay. And you know, the quality of the language is, elevated for an academic level. They're using, interesting word choice and giving us a little bit of insight and engagement. So it's a hook, right? So it's telling us about what this essay is going to be about, and it's compelling enough that makes me, as the reader, want to read more about the student's paper. And then second sentence, so they're introducing the book, right? So such is the case in Stephen King's novella Rita Hayworth and the Shawshank Redemption, when Andy Dufresne heroically challenges a soul-crushing prison system. Okay, so a couple things that the student is doing well. They give us the full name of the author, so Stephen King, first and last name. They tell us the genre, so it's, in this case, it's a novella, a short novel. But you could say if it was a short story, if it's a poem. So you really want to identify the genre of the piece that you're analyzing. And then the complete title, which they've italicized. So for longer works, like a novel or a film, you would use italics or underline. For shorter works, like a poem or an essay, journal article, you would use quotation marks around the title. So this student is following the conventions of MLA style. And then they have a little bit more insights, although when Andy Dufresne, we can assume, having watched the film and read the book, that we know Andy is the protagonist. And again, interesting writing, right? So heroically challenges a soul-crushing prison system. They're adding a little bit of their voice, their flair, choosing interesting word choice in their language. So they're really elevating what could be a boring sentence into something a little bit more interesting. And then the last sentence here, so ultimately it is Andy's unwavering belief in freedom that gives him the strength to overcome the physical and psychological abuses of a corrupt prison system. So this could be their thesis statements. It kind of clarifies, narrows down exactly what they're going to argue. In this case, they're going to argue that it's Andy's sense of freedom that's going to give him the strength to overcome those obstacles. So I assume that the students, from this sentence, they're going to have at least 2 body paragraphs, maybe discussing the physical abuses and the psychological abuses and how Andy overcomes those. So I can get a sense just from this person's intro paragraph what to expect in the rest of their paper. So that's what a good paper or introductory paragraph can do. It's going to set up your arguments, so give us your thesis. It's also going to clearly identify what are your main points or what you're going to argue, and give us a sense of the organization of your paper as well. And even little touches like adding the word ultimately. This would be like a transition word. So if on your papers you've ever seen, a prof add comments, add transition, it just adds words like ultimately or such is the case, or however, or consequently, or in addition. These are all examples of transition words, and they just help with that element of fluency or flow. And it just makes your writing sound a little bit more fluid and readable. Okay, so this would be, this is a strong introductory paragraph. And if you wanted to, adopt some of these good practices into your own writing, it would be, a good idea. So just to narrow that down, so add a hook, an intro sentence that's interesting and engaging. Mention the author's full name, the genre of the piece that you're going to analyze, the full title. Speak to the reader as if they've read what you're going to talk about, so you don't have to introduce basics. And have a clear thesis statement, and then maybe give some indication of what your main paragraphs are going to be about. So if you can do all that, you have a very strong introductory paragraph. So as far as writing a thesis statement, this is where students have some trouble coming up with what they think is a good, strong thesis statement. So a thesis statement is your argument. So what it is, what your essay is going to be about, and your take or your position on a subject. So what you want your thesis statement to do is be very specific to the topic that you're discussing. Be specific as possible. You only have so many words to write. You don't want it to be too broad and try to take on too much in your paper. So make sure you are narrowing down your topic enough that you can, complete your essay in, under 1,000 words and have a clearly defined argument. It's also a good policy to identify, at least somewhere, it doesn't have to be your thesis exactly, but in your intro you should have the title of the piece you're analyzing and the author's complete name, as well as genre, I would say. Identify whether it's a poem, a novel, etc. Your thesis statement should pose an intriguing and debatable argument or interpretation. So the key word here is debatable. It should be something that is somewhat of an argument that a reader could, agree or disagree with. And writing for an academic audience, you want to sort of convince somebody that your opinion is right. So you have to find evidence and back up all your opinions with evidence. So this evidence is going to come from the novel itself or the film or whatever it is you're analyzing. You might do research and add an expert opinion. So what have other critics said about this piece of writing? Do they back up your own opinion? And in terms of narrowing it down, your thesis should be, try to keep it into 1 or 2 sentences. No more than that. It could be, 2 sentences is fine for your thesis. Sometimes, you want to have a second sentence there to narrow down your main points. And then a good thesis can also set up your conclusions or main points that are going to be covered in the essay. So if I have some idea of what you're going to talk about for the rest of your paper just by reading your intro, that's a good sign that you've done enough in your introductory paragraph to set up your argument. So just by reading your intro, I should have a really good idea of what the rest of the paper is going to argue. So there shouldn't be any surprises. You don't save your gold, your best point for the end, your conclusion. You should include that good meaty stuff of your essay in your introduction, in the thesis even. So think of your thesis statement as like the center, the core, the foundation for the rest of the paper. And it's a good way of sort of building your paper around this central argument. Okay, so here are a couple of thesis statements that have some problems with them. So these are student thesis statements that have either 1 or 2 things wrong with them or could be written more clearly. So the first one In this paper, I'm going to write about blame in Oedipus Rex. So is this a strong thesis or a weak thesis? Well, you should not in formal academic writing use first person. So using I am going to write about is not necessary. And if you can rewrite your thesis to eliminate the first person I, it's probably your best kind of revision that you can do for a thesis like this. So you might want to adapt that thesis statement to eliminate the I, and you don't have to keep telling me that this is a paper, I'm going to write it. You know, you don't have to talk about the paper. You could just tell me what you're going to write. So blame in Oedipus Rex is evident in the theme of revenge or something like that. I don't know. So you're gonna keep going, but eliminate the I am phrasing. Okay, second example. Othello is a story about a husband who gets jealous after he thinks that she has cheated on him. Okay, it's a little too much of a plot summary here. Not much of an argument. So is this debatable? You know, it's more just stating what happens in the story or in the play. You can get a little bit more narrow, specific, and a debatable topic, right? So in this case, it's just not enough of an argument, and it's a little bit too much of just plot summary. Okay, so make sure your thesis is an argument that somebody could debate and discuss it. So look for the controversial aspects or argue something that is a unique take on that subject matter. This is your best bet for having an interesting, debatable thesis. Third example, should Oedipus be blamed for his downfall? This essay will argue why he should be blamed. Okay, so this is not so much of a thesis as it is a kind of rhetorical question. So you want your thesis to be a statement. It's called a thesis statement, not a thesis question. But if it helps you to frame your thesis as a question, this is something that you could do in your pre-writing. If you wanted to generate your thesis topic first by thinking of a research question, that's not a bad idea, but make sure that in your introductory paragraph that you actually have a thesis statement, so a sentence, not a question, as your main focus point, your thesis statement. Okay, and then last one. Othello is the king of Thebes. He does not believe the oracle. He ends up blinding himself. This is ironic. Okay, so there's an argument. It's saying there's irony in this situation, which is all right. It's just a little choppy. This student is saying his thesis in 4 short sentences. He could kind of condense it into 1 or 2 sentences and make it a little bit more fluid, less choppy. Okay, so these are some thesis statements that can be improved with revision. And make sure you are constructing your thesis statement the best possible way. Okay, so just in terms of my own writing process, these are just some tips that might help you along the way. So doing some pre-writing, this is your first step. Brainstorm, pose questions, just jot down, even do some free writing. So just get your ideas down on paper. At this point, you don't need to have a lot of organization or structure. Just generate ideas. Some students like to do kind of mapping or even diagramming of what they want to talk about. So really just getting your thoughts down on paper is a good way to start. Next step is the actual writing. So this is where you're starting to add organization to your thoughts. You have now maybe a clear idea of what you're going to argue, so your thesis is there. So this is really your first draft writing. Second thing that you, or the next part would be getting some